Well, we've made it to the end. It's the end of the reading from the Gospel of Mark for the year. This is the last week we'll read from Mark. Next week will be Stewardship Sunday and also Christ the King Sunday. And then the next week will be Advent, where we'll start reading from the Gospel of Luke. We're leaving Mark behind. We've reached the end of Mark. You'll no longer have to hear Jason talk about how Mark is the shortest gospel, how if you want to read the gospel again, you'll just read the Gospel of Mark because it's quick and fast and you'll get it over with. You'll no longer have to hear Jason talk about the Gospel of Mark. Instead, you'll have to hear him talk about the Gospel of Luke, which is longer. Because that's when we'll start reading the Gospel of Luke, beginning at the beginning, somewhere around the beginning of December and all the way until next time this year. But right now we've reached the end of Mark, because this is the last time we'll read Mark. And it's ironic, or fitting maybe, that we are reading Mark chapter 13. We're not reading the end of Mark. We're reading somewhere near the end, getting closer towards the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus, getting closer to that time in Mark. But we're not there. We're actually in the part of Mark where Jesus is getting in trouble. And Jesus starts talking about, wait for it, the end. Mark chapter 13 is known as the little apocalypse. It's the end of time, the end of all things. This is what Jesus preaches about in this chapter, and it is the last thing we read of Mark for the year. We have reached the end. I can imagine that the disciples are feeling like it's the end for them. Because Jesus has come into the temple, he's turned over all the tables, made a big ruckus, and then he has left, and now he has come back and made more trouble. Arguing with the Pharisees and religious leaders. They've had a pretty good run of it with the disciples. The disciples think, oh, we've had a really great time with Jesus. We've had a movement. We've had a momentum. We've fed thousands of people. We've gotten crowds of people to come with us. We have people following Jesus, believing that he's going to be our Messiah to change the world. They've healed people. They've seen the dead raised. They have had a great movement in their lives with just Jesus. And now they've entered into Jerusalem. Even when Jesus was riding in on the donkey towards Jerusalem, they thought, this is going to be great. This is going to be awesome. But I can imagine now they're like feeling like it's all falling apart. Because Jesus has overturned all the tables in the temple. He has made the religious leaders mad and angry. And now he has, right before this chapter, argued with the scribes, the Pharisees, the religious leaders, the Roman authorities. I mean, he is making enemies left and right, making people angry at him over and over again. I can imagine the disciples are like, what are you doing, Jesus? Are you trying to get yourself killed? I can imagine that those who are in power and authority are trying to kill him. And the ministry that the disciples have built up seems like it is falling apart fast. Everything they've hoped for, their faith even in Jesus to save them, seems to be coming to an end. So when they walk out of the temple, after Jesus has pretty much destroyed the place and made everyone there angry at him, one of the disciples looks up at the temple building and he says to Jesus, look at these stones. Look at this amazing building. I can imagine that the disciple seeing this temple, a sign of his faith, a sign of comfort and security, a sign of strength, a sign of his future home, a sign of a place where God resides, a sign that gives him safety and security. I can imagine that he's pointing out this amazing structure so that he can have some sense of security in his life, because Jesus seems to be tearing it all down. He's like, look at this stone, look at these amazing buildings. I can imagine this big building is giving him strength, security, comfort. It's like, I guess, when you walk into Duke Chapel. and you say, what a beautiful place. And you feel so at home. Or maybe when you walk into the National Cathedral and you think, oh my gosh, this place is amazing and wonderful. Or maybe it's like when you walk into this place. And for 100 years, this building being here with this beautiful stained glass windows. And you think how comforting it is in a world that seems to be falling apart to be here. To give you peace, security, and strength. To enliven your faith, to give you some hope in the world. There's a place that you can come to find peace here. I can imagine that's what the disciples is feeling like. He's looking at the building and thinking, this is a secure, comforting place in a world where it feels like everything's falling apart, where the end is here, where the end of the world as we know it has come, where the end of the ministry with Jesus seems to be over. I think that's what we do, We try to hold on to something in an unsecure, uncertain world. I mean, when the pandemic started, we did the same thing, right? When the pandemic started, we all bought toilet paper because it made us feel secure. We may run out of everything else, but at least we'll have toilet paper. It was a sign of giving us security. And remember in the middle of the pandemic, I'd gone to the grocery store. And most, if you remember, shelves were empty of stuff like that. And I saw a can of Lysol sitting by itself on the shelf. And I was like, I have to have it. I didn't really have to have it, but I had to have it. And I bought it. I mean, it's a big can of Lysol. It's still in my office. I have it on my desk as a monument, as a sign of I can be safe and secure. It's a presence there that gives me some security, even if it's not real, Look at these stones, the disciple says. Look at this building. Look at this place that God resides, this temple that we are part of, that we get to be in, this amazing structure. And those stones are enormous. It is a big building. But Jesus turns and looks at that big building and that temple. And then he turns and looks at the disciples and he says, these stones? This building? This thing's going to fall down. This stones, these buildings, this thing's going to be overthrown. Not one stone will be left on a stone. It will all come down. Thanks, Jesus. And then to make it worse, the disciples begin to say, what is this? What's happening? When will this happen? Is this a sign of something to come? And they go off into the Mount of Olives, and Peter, Andrew, James, and John, they sit there and say, Jesus, tell us about this. What is going to happen? You're saying that these things are going to fall down? That the things we have our security in, the things we have our hope in, these things aren't going to last? What are you talking about? And he says, yes, there will be wars and rumors of wars. There will be earthquakes. There will be famines. There will be false leaders trying to lead you astray into something else. So don't be led astray. There will be wars and rumors of wars. Check. Famines. Check. Earthquakes. Check. Nations against nations? Check. Leaders trying to lead you astray with false senses of security? Check, check, check. It feels like the end of the world as we know it is still here. It feels like the world that we have been living into and a part of for the last couple of years is teetering on the edge of collapse. The stones of the institutions that we have built seem to be falling around us. The things we hold dear seem to be falling one after another. Nations against nations, people against people, earthquakes, famine, pandemics. Even the church seems to be falling apart. I know it all sounds like a lot of doom and gloom. I know. But Jesus tells his disciples that these things, these earthquakes, these wars, these famines, the events that will shake the foundations of our security are not the end of things, he says. These are just the beginning of the birth pangs, he says. These are just the birth pangs of something new. What seems like hopelessness, loss, insecurity, war, destruction are not the sign of God's wrath, Jesus says. They're not the sign of God's wrath that's coming to end us all. Instead, this is a sign of God's kingdom breaking forth into the world. These are not just the pains of the end of the world. They are the pains of a new kingdom to be born, a new life to emerge, a new heaven and a new earth to come. And in order for God's new kingdom to come, in order for new life to arise, something has to shift. Something has to move. Some things have to end. I've come to believe over the past few years that having faith is not about having security or certainty. It is not about holding on to the things that will make us safe or holding on to the things that we think will save us or holding on to the things we think will give us a sense of security. I think faith instead is about letting it all go. Faith is about letting go of our desire for certainty, security, wealth, status, image. It is about letting it all go. Maybe even letting go of faith we think and the faith we have thought about so that something new might come. Parker Palmer, in his book, Let Your Life Speak, says that we should understand our life in seasons. That life is like seasons. That summer comes and there's a great abundance. Sometimes life is full of things, full of a lot. And sometimes those things we want to cling to and hold on to them. But then fall arrives. And in the fall, just like the trees that lose their leaves and their acorns and seeds, we too have to let things go. We too have to let things die. And that feels not very certain and secure. And it will feel like a winter that has settled upon your life that is barren and empty. But then the spring comes. And the things you have let go of, the things you have let die, begin to rise again. And your hands are empty long enough to grab something new. New life cannot come in the spring if we do not let go of what we cling to in the summer. Jesus told his disciples that a seed of wheat must fall to the ground and die, and only when it does that will it produce fruit in abundance. We often think that what will survive, be successful, be fruitful, that if we do all those things, we do it by collecting what we need, by holding on to what we should get, to keeping our produce, to keeping our fruit of abundance, to holding on to everything we've built. That will help us survive. That will give us strength. That will be our faith. But Jesus knows that all we get when we do that is a barn full of toilet paper and a life full of fear. If you want to lose your life for the sake of the gospel, you must let it go. If you want to gain your life, you will lose it. If you will lose it for the sake of the gospel, you will gain it, Jesus says. You want to gain your life? Let it go. Lose it. You see these stones? They will fall one after another. For the things we hold most dear, the things we believe that gives us the most security, the things we believe that will keep us and save us, are the things that will get in the way of the new kingdom of God to come, of new life to come. We cannot grasp new life when our hands are full. And if we want to live into the kingdom of God, if we want salvation to come, the stones we keep clinging to have to fall, even the stones we think are most sacred. You see these temple? It won't last. I know these days it already feels like these things are falling apart. I know. It feels like the world is coming to an end as we know it. I know it's uneasy and unsettling. The world as we have known it is not coming back. The world as we know it has come to an end. But maybe that's a good thing. Because the old ways of being haven't worked for us, or all of us. Our old ways haven't always worked well, and maybe they should come to an end. Our kingdoms we have built upon hatred and injustice probably should end. The institutions and systems we have built upon racism, maybe they should end. The religious traditions that we have settled for comfort rather than inclusive love, maybe it should end. Our old narratives that call the poor lazy and the rich hardworking, maybe it should end. Our culture of consumerism and unending consumption that destroys us and our planet, maybe it should end. Maybe some things should come to an end. And I know that if we let those things go and we stop participating in those systems that have harmed us and others, that have kept us from living the kingdom of God here on earth, it will feel like the end has come. It will feel unsafe. It will feel uncertain. It will feel like everything's falling apart. And when the wars and rumors of wars rise, when the earthquake and famines appear, we will want to cling back to the things that of old, the things that are comforting, the things that give us safety and security. We will want to return to those places. And we will easily be led astray by false prophets who want to take us back again to what once was. But do not be led astray. Instead, have faith enough to let it go. Have faith enough to trust God to bring new life and a new kingdom out of what feels like the end. Have faith enough and trust in a God to let it go, who will bring a new kingdom and a new life out of what feels like death. Have trust in God to bring forth new life and a new kingdom out of feels like uncertainty. Have faith enough and trust in God, because God's done it before in Jesus Christ. Certainly God will do it again.